Hey everyone, Chris here, the RC Geek. Welcome back. In this video, we're taking a look at the Nexa Corsair. This was a project that I worked on for work at Motion RC, and so I wanted to do something really fun with it because it's a beautiful model. It's a nice, great size, and so I just wanted to just completely, make it my own. This is a wood ARF, so it's kind of a choose your own adventure thing. You put your own servos, your own motor, and then we're gonna go through, we're gonna paint it, we're gonna detail it. So let's get into it first, guys. We gotta get it out of the box, we gotta put it together, and from there, we're gonna go into detailing and paint. So, let's go. All right, so we've got the fully assembled Nexa Corsair here now. Let's just talk about a little bit of the assembly first. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this was a work project, and so I put this together completely stock, flew the airplane as you see it here, flies amazing, okay? And so this particular model has a bit more prefabrication to it than some of maybe the other Nexa models, and that includes all of the servo trays are pre-sized for the servos that are recommended. The electric motor mount is completely pre-built. You just bolt that on and you set your spacing there. And also all of the retracts, they're all metal. You got all metal struts, like they're really, really fine quality. These are like the X-Wave quality retracts. They're made by the same manufacturer. And so I wanted to point that stuff out front just because I think it's important to understand that. And so with that in mind, the airplane goes together extremely quickly. You're bolting in servos. If you're using the kit hardware, you just go through and connect all that up. On all of the threaded connections though, for the kit hardware, you do want to use Loctite. I use blue Loctite. That's gonna make sure everything stays tight, doesn't come undone. And so when you are tightening the push rods within those keepers that are on the servos. In terms of the process, right, we started out with the motor installation. That was super quick. Had to drill 4 holes for the actual motor mount itself, but otherwise, the motor mount box bolts into place, and then you do have to set your spacing for the motor to get, you know, the cowl spacing correct. And so in the case of the Admiral motor that we're using here, basically if you glue that all the way forward, that sets your spacing perfectly. And then you go through and you double up the front and the back to make sure that's not gonna move anywhere. You get nice solid connection. You wanna be using epoxy for all of that, but otherwise it makes it super simple. So that is all in the front in the cowl area. And then from there, it was on to the empennage. Now these all just drop into place really easily. You do have to remove the covering material, so you put them in, mark them, and then you're gonna cut away the material so that way you get a wood-to-wood contact in there. They're just glued in with CA. So once you drop them in, you get them where you want them to be. They're vertical for the vertical stabilizer or perfectly horizontal for the elevator, and then also your placement from left to right and making sure everything is exactly centered. And then from there, it was just a matter of putting in all of the control surfaces. It does come pre-hinged. Once you've got the horizontal and vertical stabilizer glued into place, then you are gonna glue your hinges into place. You want to make sure that you oil those hinges really well so that way you don't gum them up with the CA. Since we're at the back of the airplane, we just put the tail wheel into place. It's held in place with some shaft collars, and so once that's all in there, it works beautifully. And then once that was all in there, it was into the servo installation in the fuselage itself, right? So elevator, rudder. So everything drops into place. You do have to drill holes for the screws themselves. You do have to feed the push rods through, and then you also do have to install the control horns on the control surfaces. Do take your time with that. You know, you've got the plastic keeper on one side and the control horn on the other side, so you do have to get that to all line up well. Just keep that in mind. You're gonna have to drill through and make sure that everything is lining up because you don't want those to obviously come loose, right? And so that more or less completed, right, the fuselage assembly with the exception of the cowl. I designed and 3D printed a centering template so that way I had the motor completely centered in the cowl, so that way when I screwed it into place that the motor was perfectly centered. And then it was onto the wings. You start with the wing center section based on the instructions. You start with the landing gear first. Now, these are all metal electric landing gear. They're gorgeous. They operate absolutely beautifully. Those drop into place, you screw them in, and then the beautiful thing about this kit is the main gear doors come completely pre-hinged and pre-set up. All you have to do is drop your servo in for that and connect it, and that gets your main gear doors operating. And so I'm just using the sequencer in the Spectrum radio. The doors are set up on a separate channel. The front strut door, that is a really simple situation that they have worked out, and so it's just a wood piece that captures on the strut that you glued to the door, and then the door just gets held by a single screw when you put the cover on. So it just has a really nice, easy swing to it. Everything operates super reliably. Now from there, you've got the 3 segmented flaps, right? So the inboard flaps come, they are not glued into the wings, so you have to connect a push rod and then feed that through, and then you do have to glue the hinges into the wing. So what I have is the inboard servos set up on one channel and then the outboard servos set up on another channel. Once that is all set up, again, using all of the kit hardware, you go to the outer wing panels. You've got the plastic keeper, just like with the elevators and the rudder, that's on the ailerons. I do recommend using that. And then for the flap, you're just using wood screws. It's not as critical a surface, but when you are doing that, you want to run a little thin CA into the balsa wood just to make sure that you've got a really hard surface that the screws are biting into. The kit does come with a set of ordnance, and that includes rockets for the outboard wing sections and the external tanks for the inboard section. Now, I made all of that removable. Flying the airplane, I did find that it flew a little nicer and cleaner with all that stuff off. Not surprising, right? And so to do that, right, the pylons for the tanks do get glued into the wing center section, and then from there I just use 4 screws to hold the tanks on. And so if I want to take the tanks off, I just back out the screws and pull them off. As it sits, completely stock, flies beautifully. It's a really nice, stable flyer. From here, let's do some detailing work. I wanted to try out this new paint that I found that's all federal standard colors, so this is gonna be a great subject for that. So let's get on to that. We've got some detailing to do, so let's get to it. Now, before we get into it, I wanna mention this video is brought to you by PCBWay. If you have any kind of maker needs, like if you got 3D printing or machining, electronics, anything of that sort that needs to be made, they have a huge list of services that they offer that are all related to that. And so if you are doing any kind of design work, they can help you realize those designs. And so be sure to check them out. I've got a link down in the description where you can check out their website, PCBWay.com. And a big thank you to them for their support. The detailing, I think we're done. Let's paint. All right, guys, so here is the finished Corsair. Man, I am so excited with how this came out. I really wasn't sure when I started the project just how it was gonna come out, and it actually came out so much better than I expected. The beauty of it is that, you know, this material makes it super easy to paint. You don't have to do a bunch of prep work. So as a result, you can get something like this with kind of minimal work. And so after putting this together, you know, there were a few items that I knew that I wanted to do in terms of the detailing, right? And so I knew I wanted to add a retractable tail wheel. I wanted to replace the faux engine in the front to something that looked a lot more scale. And I wanted to add a bomb drop. Those were kind of the big three, and then there were a couple other items that I ended up doing in the process. And so I started out with the engine, of course. That was all 3D printed. It ended up being really easy. It was just a matter of printing it out and putting it in the airplane, painting it up, of course. Printed it in black. It's black ABS. And so I just did some dry brushing. I painted the crankcase, you know, the gearbox in the center gray, and that was mostly it. I literally just hot glued it to the firewall, and that's it. And the difference in the result is just so night and day. It looks like a true radial engine in the front. It was really worth the effort, and like I said, it really wasn't that much effort to do it. While I was at it, you know, I wanted to replace the tires on the struts just because I wanted something a little bit softer, and so I got the same size tire as what was in the kit, but in a Robart variety, and I do have a foam cylinder in there to kind of reinforce the tire, because otherwise they get a little flat based on the weight of the airframe. That was a really easy swap, and then I've painted the struts because they come gray and they were white on the full scale, and so that was really easy to do as well. From there, since I was working on the wing, it was all about the 3D printed bomb drop and the bomb release. And so I just used the E-flite payload release, and then I designed and 3D printed a World War II 500-pound bomb. And so it is a break apart style, and so I printed it out of flexible TPU, and the fins actually hold the two halves together plus magnets. And so that way when it flies, it stays together, but it's open cavity, so I can put some flour or anything like that in there. And so then when it flies and it impacts, it breaks apart, and so just to get that explosion effect, you know. And so otherwise, I think the biggest modification that I did, which still wasn't terribly hard, but it was the retractable tail wheel on the back. And so what I ended up doing is I used the tail wheel hardware and plastic from the Flightline Corsair, and then I used a nose retract unit to actuate it. So, because if you use the Flightline Corsair retract, it's not a full 90-degree retract, and what I needed back there to get it to all work out with the geometry was 90 degrees, so that way it pulled the doors closed. I cut the doors off of the plastic pieces that comes in the kit, and I just simply hinged those, glued those hinges, you know, to the plastic pieces, and then that's how I created the doors. I've got a spring that pushes the doors outwards in the down position, and then when the retract comes up, there's a string across that pulls it closed. Now, one of the last things I wanted to mention is, you know, I've got a 3-blade prop on here now. This is a Vario prop that comes from Germany, and it is variable pitch. You can change the pitch on the ground. So I was running a 1912 before, and I wanted to increase the pitch a little bit, and so I'm at about an 18 by 13 or 14 pitch now. And so it'll be interesting to see how that does. I got to do all the ground testing with it still, but it should be a really nice looking prop on there. Now, once I had all of that detailing done, it was on to the painting. Now, there was not much prep work that was required. I simply burnished the whole airframe down with a Scotch-Brite pad, and then from there, applied a light coat of primer. I didn't want to spend a bunch of time primering the airplane. You don't need to. It was just to kind of make it all one color for the paint. And so from there, I just lightly wet sanded it with 600 and then started painting. And the paints are a brand called Crosslink, and they are an acrylic enamel, kind of like what I had used on my B-58 that I had some mixed success with. Now, this particular brand I had much better success with. They are FS colors. I've got, you know, insignia white on the bottom. We got the intermediate blue, it's that light blue color, and then of course we got the dark sea blue on the top, and that is a very distinctive color on the Corsair. And so it's kind of a blue with a hint of green to it. And so this really has the right look of that. To paint it all off, you know, I painted the white first, and I used the 3M soft edge masking tape, masked off for the light blue, sprayed the light blue, and then masked off for the dark blue with that same soft edge masking tape. And then I painted the dark blue over that. Now, to get the nice feathered edges on all of those separation lines, I went back and airbrushed all of those. And so I've done that a bunch before. I did that on the big Sky Raider. And so it's a great, easy technique. You just spray the stuff into a cup and use it as is. And so once I had it all painted, it was onto the markings. Now these came from Cowl Graphics. They are printed and cut vinyl. It just made life a whole lot easier. I didn't want to go through the process of painting the markings a lot, so I just wanted something quick and simple. Now, one of the things I want to mention is in the case of the stars and bars, I had actually pulled the transfer tape off of those and sprayed Windex onto the surface so that way I could slide it around like a decal and get the placement exactly where I wanted it. But otherwise, once I had all of the markings done, so all this stuff you see on here, that was all the Cowl Graphics, it was onto the panel lines. And so I just used a pencil. And so I had to really kind of work the pencil to really get it to pop through the way that I wanted. And so once I did all of that, and it was mostly like in the dark blue, which is not uncommon, right? For the full-scale airplane, you don't really see the hard separation lines either, right? And so the effect is right, but it was just trying to get enough of the color to transfer from the pencil onto the surface. I was using tapes and rulers and kind of just eyeballing it. I had a drawing and it just kind of, you know, went for it. I didn't do much measuring or scaling or anything. I just wanted it to look about right. And so once I had those all done, I sprayed a light matte clear over it just to protect them, and I did all my weathering process. And so that starts with an acrylic wash to get streaking from on the underside. So I used raw umber on the other underside. That's my go-to color for this stuff. Then I did some streaking on the upper side. So I ended up finding a light tan color. And so the lighter streaking you see on the wings and stuff, I used that lighter color, and it ended up being kind of the perfect color for that in the dark surfaces. From there, I used really, really thin down black, airbrushed over all of the panel lines, burnished that down with a Scotch-Brite pad, and then to finish that all up, I used some really thinned down white, and I wanted to fade slightly the centers of the fabric covered surfaces, right? So the Corsair has a fabric center section here in the outboard wing. The elevators and the rudder, those are fabric as well, and they're actually ribbed surfaces on the model. And so I just airbrushed lightly the white through the centers of all of that, top and bottom on the wing in this center section, and then on the tail surfaces as well. And that was mostly it. You know, when I was looking at pictures of the full scale, it's not like it was this heavily faded airplane per se. It was very well used, but it didn't have this just like crazy fading that I've seen on some others. Honestly, I didn't want to go that deep with it anyways. I just wanted something that looked really cool, looked really nice. And so I think that covers all of it. There's been a lot to go through, but now let's take this outside. Let's get a full peek of the whole thing, completely finished. Let's check it out. All right, there we have it, guys. We've got the Nexa Corsair. This thing is completely custom now. And the beautiful thing about this model is that covering material makes life so easy. You don't have to go through and strip it all down and fiberglass it, although you can if you want to, but that covering really receives paint beautifully, with minimal prep work. So you can do something completely custom that looks fantastic, really just have a lot of fun with it and use it to experiment and try different things, new techniques and stuff. Now it is time, we're gonna take this out to the field, we're gonna get it flown. I've got to do some power system testing with the power system, the new prop that's on there. And so we got to do some checks there, make sure everything is good to go. And so yeah, I'm really excited about that. I can't wait to get this out to the field. Get her flown, it's gonna look so amazing in the air. Otherwise, if you wanna learn more about the techniques here, guys, I've published multiple books on the subject. I've got a link down in the description for that. Everything that I cover in the books is applicable to all mediums, whether it's fiberglass, wood, foam, any of it, you can do it. It'll help guide you through it if you're really looking to, expand your arsenal of tools in finishing. Otherwise, if you wanna see the custom work that I did on my Freewing SR71, you can see that here. And until next time, I'll see you at the field.